Today is January 1st. I am Rob, I'm an alcoholic, and it is a joy to be with you here on this inaugural episode of Big Book Daily. Just a quick introduction on me. I am a recovering alcoholic. I am not a professional narrator. I'm just going to lay that out there right away. I'm just a guy that wants to read through the big book, and we're in this lifeboat together, and I'm excited to kind of go through this journey with you. My personal goals for this podcast is that it would just help one person. Maybe this will help somebody out there, while also holding me accountable to read the big book daily. So the way it's going to work is we're just going to read about 5 pages a day, very, very small chunks. That's about all this alcohol can handle anyway, and I'm just excited that you're with me. I'll be reading primarily at least the first go around through the 4th edition of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. With all that, today we're going to be reading the preface, the foreword to the 1st edition, and part of the foreword to the 2nd edition, out of the 4th edition of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. If I mispronounce the words, please show me some grace. Here we go. Preface. This is the 4th edition of the Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. The 1st edition appeared in April 1939, and in the following 16 years, more than 300,000 copies went into circulation. The 2nd edition, published in 1955, reached a total of more than 1,150,500 copies. The 3rd edition, which came off the press in 1976, achieved a circulation of approximately 19,550,000 in all formats. Because this book has become the basic text for our society and has helped such large numbers of alcoholic men and women to recover, there exists a strong sentiment against any radical changes being made in it. Therefore, the first portion of this volume, describing the AA recovery program, have been left largely untouched in the course of revisions made for the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th editions. The section called The Doctor's Opinion has been kept intact, just as it was originally written in 1939 by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth, our society's great medical benefactor. The 2nd printing of the 1st edition added the appendix Spiritual Experience in the 2nd edition, the appendices on the AA tradition, the medical view and religious view of AA, the Lasker Award, and information on how to contact AA were added, and the appendix on the Alcoholic Foundation was discontinued. But the chief change was in the section of personal stories, which was expanded to reflect the fellowship's growth. Bill's story, Dr. Bob's nightmare, and one other personal history from the 1st edition were retained intact. 3 were edited, and one of these was retitled. New versions of 2 stories were written, with new titles. 30 completely new stories were added, and the stories section was divided into 3 parts, under the same headings that are used now. In the 3rd edition, Part 1, Pioneers of AA, was left unchanged. 9 stories in Part 2, They Stopped in Time, were carried over from the 2nd edition. 8 new stories were added. In Part 3, They Lost Nearly All, 8 stories were retained. 5 new ones were added. The 4th edition includes the 12 concepts for world service and revises the 3 sections of personal stories as follows. 1 new story has been added to Part 1, and 2 that originally appeared in Part 3 have been repositioned there. 6 stories have been deleted. 6 of the stories in Part 2 have been carried over. 11 new ones have been added, and 11 taken out. Part 3 now includes 12 new stories. 8 were removed, in addition to the 2 that were transferred to Part 1. All changes made over the years in the Big Book, AA members' fond nickname for this volume, have had the same purpose, to represent the current membership of Alcoholics Anonymous more accurately, and thereby to reach more alcoholics. If you have a drinking problem, we hope that you may pause in reading one of the 42 personal stories and think, yes, that happened to me. Or, more important, yes, I've felt like that. Or most important, yes, I believe this program can work for me too. Forward to the 1st edition. This is the forward as it appeared in the very first printing of the 1st edition in 1939. We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. For them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. We think this account of our experiences will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person, and besides, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages for all. It's important that we remain anonymous, because we are too few at present to handle the overwhelming number of personal appeals which may result from this publication. Being mostly business or professional folk, we cannot well carry on our occupations in such an event. We would like it understood that our alcoholic work is an avocation. When writing or speaking publicly about alcoholism, we urge each of our fellowship to omit his personal name, designating himself instead as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Very earnestly, we ask the press also to observe this request, for otherwise we shall be greatly handicapped. We are not an organization in the conventional sense of the word. There are no fees or dues whatsoever. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. We are not allied with any particular faith, sect, or denomination, nor do we oppose anyone. We simply wish to be helpful to those who are afflicted. We shall be interested to hear from those who are getting results from this book, particularly from those who have commenced work with other alcoholics. We should like to be helpful to such cases. Inquiry by scientific, medical, and religious societies will be welcomed. Alcoholics Anonymous. Foreword to the second edition. Figures given in this foreword describe the fellowship as it was in 1955. Since the original foreword to this book was written in 1939, a wholesale miracle has taken place. Our earliest printing voiced the hope that every alcoholic who journeys will find the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous at its destination. Already, continues the earliest text, 2s and 3s and 5s of us have sprung up in other communities. 16 years have elapsed between our first printing of this book and the presentation in 1955 of our second edition. In that brief space, Alcoholics Anonymous has mushroomed into nearly 6,000 groups whose membership is far above 150,000 recovered alcoholics. Groups are to be found in each of the United States and all the provinces of Canada. AA has flourishing communities in the British Isles, the Scandinavian countries, South Africa, South America, Mexico, Alaska, Australia, Hawaii. All told, promising beginnings have been made in some 50 foreign countries and U.S. possessions. Some are just now taking shape in Asia. Many of our friends encourage us by saying that this is but a beginning, only the augury of a much larger future ahead. The spark that was to flare into the first AA group was struck at Akron, Ohio, in June 1935, during a talk between a New York stockbroker and an Akron physician. 6 months later, the broker had been relieved of his drink obsession by a sudden spiritual experience, followed by a meeting with an alcoholic friend who'd been in contact with the Oxford groups of that day. He had also been greatly helped by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth, a New York specialist in alcoholism, who was now accounted no less than a medical saint by AA members, and whose story of the early days of our society appears in the next pages. From this doctor, the broker had learned the grave nature of alcoholism. Though he could not accept all the tenets of the Oxford groups, he was convinced of the need for a moral inventory, confession of personal defects, restitution to those harmed, helpfulness to others, and the necessity of belief in and dependence upon God. And today we will stop there. We're about one page in the foreword of the second edition. Thank you so much for joining me on the very first day. I hope you have a great day, and we will see you back here tomorrow.